Hello, everyone. Are you ready to be fired up? Because I sure am. I've got John Lee Dumas here. He is the host of Entrepreneurs on Fire, an award-winning podcast where he interviews inspiring entrepreneurs who are truly on fire. With over 2,500 episodes, 1 million plus listeners a month, yes, a month, and 7 figures of annual revenue, JLD is just getting started. Visit eofire.com to set your entrepreneurial journey on fire. And let's go. Welcome, John. Thanks for being here.
Krista, welcome from Puerto Rico, where the sun is shining, the birds are singing, and I am fired up to be here.
Yeah, so you have an amazing business. I've been doing a lot of research about you, and one of the episodes I listened to showed that you took a 90-day vacation with Kate, your wife, while working basically an hour a day. And so I really want to get into your accomplishments, how you did it. I know you've had some ups and downs, mostly always up for the past, multiple years, but it hasn't always been that way. So we just want to learn from you and help the listeners get how they can get to that level.
I love it. I'm ready to ignite.
Okay, so tell us. I mean, it hasn't always been easy. You've obviously, I know that you were in the military, so thank you for serving our country. And I really do respect that, by the way. I'd be too scared, I think. I know I'd be too scared. But so you did that. You came out, you had some rocky years and then got a great mentor, Pat Flynn, and just kind of went forward. So I want you to tell us about your journey.
Yeah, so my journey is not a straight line, like you mentioned. I mean, I kind of grew up in a small town in Maine, went to college under Army ROTC scholarship, spent 8 years as an officer in the U.S. Army, and had a bunch of failed attempts at careers. I failed corporate finance. I dropped out of law school after one semester. I, just was a disaster when it came to real estate, both commercial and residential. Like, I just wasn't able to kind of find my groove. But one thing that I always did was consume content, like the right content too. Like I was reading the right books, listening to the right audiobooks. And then when I found podcasts, started listening to the right podcasts like Pat Flynn, who you mentioned, amongst others. And I was just blown away by all this great free on-demand content that podcasting gave. And for me, it was just like, man, I'm going to go find that daily podcast that interviews entrepreneurs because I need this kind of inspiration every single day if I'm ever going to get out of my funk, if I'm ever going to find myself and, launch and create the kind of life and business that I really dream of. And Krista, the show did not exist. Like, I couldn't believe it. I was like, how does this not exist? Like, I don't know if you've ever watched that movie. I think it's called Yesterday, where the guy wakes up one day and all of a sudden nobody's heard of the Beatles. Nobody's heard of this or that. He's like, how is this possible? How have you never heard of the Beatles? But it was just some weird, situation where everybody had forgotten about them or they never existed in this alternate universe that he was in. And I felt like I was in this alternate universe because I'm like, it's such an obvious, huge, massive winning idea. If nobody's doing it, I'm going to take a cue from Gandhi and be that change that I want to see in the world. And so I launched a daily podcast back in 2012 when podcasting wasn't that big of a thing.
Amazing. Like that is 7 years ago. Nobody was doing it then,
Nobody.
And guess blue ocean.
And the point that I want to make here is the day that I launched Entrepreneurs on Fire, it was the best daily podcast interviewing entrepreneurs. It was the worst daily podcast interviewing entrepreneurs. It was the only daily podcast interviewing entrepreneurs. And by the way, that has been a theme in the over 2,600 entrepreneurs that I've now interviewed is they found something that wasn't being served in the marketplace. And they filled that void better than anybody else was willing to do so. And I'm sure you have a lot of stories with those 2 Comma Club awards behind you for doing just that, because that's how you really find your niche, get momentum, get traction in this world is by identifying a niche that's not being served or is being underserved and coming in and being best in show. Because guess what? I wasn't good at podcasting when I started. I wasn't a good host. I wasn't a good interviewer, but I was the only show in town. Just back in the day when you had the one movie theater on Main Street, they got all the business, no matter if their service was the worst, because you had no place else to go if you wanted to watch a movie. And of course you wanted to watch a movie, so you went. That was my show for a while. Fortunately, I put in the reps, I worked my booty off, and I got slowly better over time, over hundreds and hundreds and now thousands and thousands of episodes. But it took time, but I found my niche, I served my audience, and I've grown Entrepreneurs on Fire now into a podcast that gets over 1 million listens per month that makes multiple millions of dollars a year. And thank goodness for Puerto Rico, I get to keep all of that money. And life is good. Life is good.
Yeah. And, so a couple things. John became the category king of podcasting, and he did a couple things. He wasn't afraid to go out there and put himself out there. He said I was the best and the worst because he was the only one, and he didn't stop going. Now he has people like Russell Brunson advertising on his podcast and many, many others. Where it's
big bucks, by the way.
I know. Huh? I was like, Russell's on there. I need to find out how much that costs to advertise on there. But no, I just applaud you, and you have the best attitude. So now he actually teaches. There's a couple things. You have a book coming out, which is great. And you teach. I actually went through Podcasters Paradise. So thank you very much. That's how I
was wondering why you were so good.
Oh, you're so funny. But no, I actually went through your Podcasters Paradise course. And it's been in August. It'll be a year in August. And we are now like at 15,000 a month. We're doing really, really well. And it's all from
That's
what
huge.
Through Podcasters Paradise. So thank you so much for that. But he lays it out step by step what to do. So let me ask you this, because many people are thinking, well, why do I need a podcast? And a podcast won't work for me in my niche because I'm a realtor, I'm a window cleaner, I'm just a X, whatever profession it might be. Can you please talk about that? Because I think podcasting is getting more and more popular because people, it's so readily available and you don't have to watch the video. So I think it's even becoming more popular. Can you help talk about how a podcast really, really can help any type of local business or professional?
So listen, podcasting's special because it's never going to be like the all-encompassing thing. You're not going to have people sitting around at night in a circle, all listening to their podcasts, like twiddling their thumbs. Like, no, podcasting is special because it fits a part of your day. It's only going to be a part of your day. Maybe it's when you commute to work. Maybe it's when you're at the gym. Maybe it's when you're walking your dog. Maybe it's when you're folding laundry. But just like you had kind of briefly mentioned, it's amazing because it allows you to be entertained while doing things that aren't entertaining. Let's be honest, most of the things that I mentioned aren't necessarily entertaining. In fact, I used to hate doing dishes. You can ask Kate. I used to hate doing dishes. Now they're pretty darn bearable because I'm like, you know what? I can pop on my favorite podcast and catch up and just kind of zone out and do this and do that, or, fold laundry, or now I can take, we have a new golden doodle, Gus. He's 3.5 months old. Take him on a little walk and I'm listening to my podcast as he stops and pees on every single, leaf of grass that's out there. I mean, and it's fine because I'm just like, I'm being entertained, I'm enjoying myself. And so for you in your business, if you're watching or listening to this, it's like podcasting gives you this amazing opportunity to intimately connect with the people that are listening to your content, and you can deliver direct value to their world. So when you think of what is your area of expertise, what is the specific value that you can deliver, do that via a podcast. And guess what? You're going to be able to intimately connect with them when it comes to them consuming that content, because they're going to be listening to this when they're by themselves in a car, while they're, cranking it out on that exercise bike, when they're off walking their dog in the morning, just thinking about that first cup of coffee, like your voice is there. And I'll have people come up to me at conferences, and I'm sure you've probably had this, Krista, being in this for almost a year already. And they're going to be like, you know what? It's going to sound a little weird, John, but I really feel like I know you because I've heard your voice so often when people are like, I listen to you every day in the shower. And I'm like, I'm picturing you naked right now. It's a little weird, but I get it because I listen to my Alexa flash briefings and, it's just like one of those morning routines, it's like one of those things. And I'm like, I feel like I know you. And I'm like, that's not weird. I totally get it because I feel the same way about the podcast hosts that I listen to. I feel like I know them. Like I'm interviewing Guy Raz next month. He's a host of this podcast called How I Built This, which I've listened to for probably 10 years now. It's an amazing podcast. And like when I interview him, I'm going to be like, what's up, Guy? And he'll be like, hey, John, like, do we know each other? And I'll be like, you don't know me, but I know you, because that's just how podcasting is.
No, it's so true. So I teach like video and social media, how to be the authority figure, and it's constantly know, like, trust, break down barriers, be seen as the authority. And it's the same so video is very, very powerful because they really develop a relationship with you, but it's the same thing through podcasting. I just did a call today and this girl's like, I've been listening to you for a year on your podcast and I feel like I know you. And I'm all, oh, yay. Like, it's working, and it just makes the sales so much easier because first of all, you're attracting the right people so that your job becomes easier because they already know they like you, and they're repelling the ones that don't like you, right? And then when you get to that appointment, they already trust you. And so it's almost like this, where do I sign?
So when I have people that, come to me and they're like, John, I've been through a free podcast course. I've read your podcasting book. I've gone through your podcast journal. Tell me, why should I join Podcasters Paradise? And I'm like, honestly, if you're not sold at this point, having listened to all those tutorials and watched all the videos and read all the books, then, it's not my job right now to convince you, if this is right for you or not, because that's what this type of content allows us to do, is to prove ourselves by delivering this amazing, free, consistent value. So I'm a big believer in that. 99% of, my sales for Podcasters Paradise come from me not having to do a one-on-one call, because that's just not the way that I'm going to run my business. I want my content to speak for itself. I want the value that I've already delivered to speak for itself. And if it doesn't, then like you said, I need to be thinking about repelling this person, because they're just probably not the right fit for what I'm producing.
Well, I'll tell you why you want to go to Podcasters Paradise, because it actually is a great course. And I went through it. It's super affordable, tons of value, a great community. And it's exactly what we did too. I actually went through it myself and then had my team go through it. I'm like, okay, I went through it. And now you guys do all the technical stuff, because they're, a little bit better at that than me, but it absolutely helped us. It was great. So I really want to thank you for that. Now,
welcome.
You said one thing too. You said, I consumed a lot of content, right? But it was the right content. Because sometimes we teach people, don't consume all this negativity, but you consumed the right content, which helped get you to the level where you want to go. And then you also are a producer of content. So you can elaborate a little bit more on that, because I think that's a huge, huge point for our audience.
So it's very important for you to audit yourself. And there's one reason, Krista, why I end every one of my podcasts, Entrepreneurs on Fire, with this quote by Jim Rohn. You're the average of the 5 people you spend the most time with. And you've been hanging out with Krista and JLD today. So keep up that heat, because I mean it. It is so important who you spend the most time with. And when you're listening to us right now, to Kristen and myself, you're spending time with us. When you're watching a video or listening to a podcast, that might be the person that is in your top 5 for that day. When somebody listens to a 45-minute episode with me, I'm probably in their top 5 for that day of somebody that they spent the most time with. Because are you really spending 45 minutes with 5 different people over the course of a day? Probably not on that kind of quality level. So you really need to be very specific and audit the type of content that you're consuming, the type of opportunities that you're allowing into your life, because all of this is going to have a big impact on what you produce, on your attitude, on your personality, on, how grateful you are for what you are actually consuming as, a podcast listener or watching a video, wherever that might be. And it's all going to have a massive impact. And I think it's important to note, this doesn't mean to cut off and never speak to people outside of your top 5 again. Not at all. They're just not in your top 5. You need to say, who are my top 5? How does that look for my average? Is somebody in there really dragging it down, my average? And if it's so, how can I move them to number 6 or 11 or 20? And how can I really make sure that my top 5 is solid? So I can tell you, my top 5, it's rock solid, because I know how important it is to keep my average up. And it's one reason why the business that I've had has been so successful for so long.
I love how you just worded that. The people, your podcast is a part of your top 5. That is so, I'm actually going to go do a podcast about that as soon as we're done. Well,
I love it.
I'm going to go record it. Yeah. Cause it was so good. Cause that's so true.
And Krista, it's important for you to get that message across to your podcast listeners, because you want them to realize that, hey, as they're using their time right there to spend with you, that's so valuable for that very reason.
And it didn't hit me until you just said that. You need to go onto Podcasters Paradise. You probably already have that. And just remind everybody of that, because that's true. It keeps them wanting to come back for more. And that's how we develop. We grow. We put ourselves with others that have achieved more than we have in the areas that we don't, that we want to achieve more greatness in. So,
I love it.
That's great. And your attitude is so good too, which is amazing. And that's why you're so easy to listen to. And you're right. You have a very distinctive voice, because I've listened to you so much that if I was in a party and it was 100 people and I heard you, I'd be like, hey,
you're that's John Lee Dumas. And by the way, again, and that's happened to me, for other, I remember so clearly being in an event and having my back turned to where the front desk check-in is and talking to somebody, and then hearing somebody checking in and being like, oh, that's David Simon Garland. Like, I know that voice. And I turned around and there he was. And I was like, wow, this is so weird. But like, that is just, we connect with voice. Like humans connect with voice. Visual too, but voice is very important.
And then you're like, hey, how you doing? Like, act like you know him. They're like, weirdo, I don't know you. But when that happens, like to you, you're like, I know it's working. That's what I always tell my students.
Exactly.
Yeah. As soon as they recognize you and say, oh, I see you everywhere. Aren't you that person? Or they're staring kind of weird. Then you know that your marketing is working. Like that's a good thing,
Totally.
Well, great. Well, I know we're about time to wrap up here. So I always like to, first of all, I want to thank you for being here. I know you're so busy. He actually is doing 20 episodes a day? So just tell me a little bit about that. That is insane.
One day per
energy up.
Listen, number one, like the energy is easy. Cause hello, like I'm talking to people like you all day. Like what else would I want to be doing? Like this is why I do what I do. Cause I love having these conversations. Number two, I look at it like my Super Bowl. Like I get up this morning. I'm like, this is the one day per month. I'm going to crush it on other people's shows. And I just bring it every single episode because I really enjoy having these conversations. And number three, I know the value of them. One of the number one questions that I get by a long shot is, how do I grow my podcast audience? And my answer is podcast listeners listen to podcasts. So guess what, Krista? Like I'm talking to you right now to the converted. You've already converted all of your listeners into loving your podcast, into loving your videos. And now hopefully if I'm able to give value to them, the average podcast listener listens to 7 podcasts. So I'm just trying to get them to try my podcast, Entrepreneurs on Fire, and become one of their 7. Of course, they're not going to stop listening to you. Like you're going to be their number one, their favorite. Like that's how it should be. But maybe I'm going to be one of their 7. And that's how over the years, I've been able to grow my podcast, Entrepreneurs on Fire, into over 1.1 million listens every single month is by committing to being on other podcasts because podcast listeners listen to podcasts. So, I know you're going to let me go here for multiple reasons, but I want to say thanks for having me on. I know you wanted me to share briefly about my current project, which is my first traditionally published book. It's coming out in the spring of 2021. So maybe reach back out to me and I'll come on when it is officially available, but it's called The Common Path to Uncommon Success. Because I'm a big believer that, people try to complicate things. It's simple. There's a common path to uncommon success. And I really lay it out in this book step by step. I'm really proud of it. HarperCollins has been a great partner. They published Rachel Hollis, John Maxwell, and it's really been fun working with them. It's going to be my first traditionally published book. So that'll be a blast. And if people want to learn more about just what I have going on, eofire.com is the website. We have a lot of great free courses on podcasting, coming with your big idea. And then my podcast is Entrepreneurs on Fire.
Gotta listen to it. It's great. He interviews some amazing thought leaders, professionals, entrepreneurs. And one thing I remember you saying one time was, I wish, it's so hard to spell entrepreneur. I still don't know how. I remember you saying that about when you name your podcast. But anyways, John, I want to respect your time. Thank you for being here. I appreciate you. You are amazing. Everyone, knowledge is key. If you don't take action, nothing happens. Thank you so much for giving us a little bit of your time and go make it happen. Make it a great day.
Thanks, Krista.
You're awesome. Thank you. I knew you got to go, but I really appreciate you. You're the bomb.
Thank you. Bye.
Okay, go rock it out. Bye. Hey there. I have a brand new podcast called F.I.R.E.D Up with Krista Mashore, where I bring my high energy right to your ears. This podcast is available on all your favorite podcast platforms. So do me a favor, go subscribe and leave a review. All this information is free and I cannot wait to teach you everything I know. Thanks so much for watching my video. You can learn more about how to be a successful real estate professional by watching other videos that I have. And be sure to subscribe to my channel. And as always, make it a great home selling and buying day.